just like men. In the Second World War, 10 million men were drafted into the armed forces of the United States. Under the ERA, roughly half of them would be men and half of them would be women. Now, someone might say, well, but wait a minute, women have lower upper body strength, and that would screen out a great number of them. But keep in mind that lower upper body strength is a sexual distinction, and this says that we will not deny or abridge any rights based on account of sex. Now, you might not have a lawsuit by a woman. You might very well have a lawsuit by a man who says, wait a minute, I'm being drafted. I shouldn't be drafted. Why not draft women instead, or at least in addition, and draft them equally, which would drive down my draft number and I wouldn't have to go. So this is something that I think is likely to happen. Now, not only that, but you know, there's been experimentation back and forth about women in combat units. Now, it's clear that most women do not desire to be. There are a handful who would like to be in military, in frontline units, but very few. And under the ERA, it is clearly arguable, and I think quite likely, that when we talk about frontline combat, we're probably talking about roughly equal numbers of men and women. Because again, if you say, well, now wait a minute, a woman can't carry as much, she can't carry as heavy a load of ammunition, weapons, so forth. Wait a minute, this is a sexual distinction, and you cannot take sex into account. So we're going to have, I think, a very, very severe and radical alteration in the military draft and in service within combat. I think under this, because we cannot distinguish among sexes, the units could not separate men and women. Separate toilets, showers, or sleeping arrangements would be forbidden. And as a consequence, I will tell you, you know, we may have a very highly trained and highly disciplined military force today. I have lived through a situation where I have watched the military go from a superb state of discipline to one where it was somewhat resembling a mob towards the latter days of Vietnam and post-Vietnam. And we put at risk, at grave risk, women who are in service in those situations of chaos and violence and difficulty. You don't just fight in the daytime. You fight in the night, and you don't just fight out in the open. You fight deep in the jungle, where sometimes you only have one person that you're in contact with at a time. I've been there. I know that. And if the person that you're fighting with has some inclinations that are not what we would like, it places women at very grave risk. One of the things that has not been discussed with all of this is its impact on churches. Now remember, we cannot deny rights to anyone under this constitutional amendment on account of sex, and the rights will not be denied or abridged. Well, what about our churches? The Catholic Church distinguishes based upon sex who will be involved in the priesthood. The Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints has very, very strict distinctions between the roles of men and women within the church. I have attended Muslim mosques a number of times, and I will tell you that women are totally and completely separated from men within the Muslim mosques. I understand that in Orthodox Jewish temples, somewhat similar situations are found. The list goes on and on. The Southern Baptists make significant distinctions between the roles of men and women in their churches. And beyond that, beyond what happens within the churches, donors would be unable to deduct gifts from their tax returns to organizations such as Catholic Charities. Catholic Charities, probably one of the biggest charitable organizations in the country, but there are distinctions based on sex in various areas driven by the faith of the Catholic Church. Let's look at privacy, remembering that there will be the equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. So in privacy, no public college or K through 12 public school could separate boys and girls or men and women in dormitories, toilet, shower facilities. And I believe that this would make school attendance threatening and quite dangerous for girls and women. I thought about prisons because I've done a lot of work in prisons. I've been present in probably a dozen of them. And I was fortunate. I received or got a pardon for Alan Crawford, and I went to Goochland Women's Prison. So I've been there a number of times, including when she was pardoned by Governor Tim Kaine. Our prisons are separate by race, or rather by sex. We have male and female prisons, but under this, you could not distinguish between men and women in the prisons. In most instances, and there are exceptions, but in most instances, our prisons have two-man cells, two-person cells, whatever you want to call them. Under this rule, under this amendment, if applied literally, without abridgment, then male and female prisoners could not be assigned to cells based on their sex. I don't imagine that women prisoners could be subjected to more horrific conditions than these, to be placed in cells with men year after year, sometimes for many years, and that would be a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, the ERA has languished since Congress passed it in 1972. It was flying through because just like all of us here, just like the patron, just like all of us, we do believe in equal rights. I don't believe there is a person on either side of the aisle who does not believe in equal rights. But while it was flying forward to passage, suddenly it came to a screeching halt once its rather drastic and very dangerous and very harmful implications became apparent. Not only did it come to a screeching halt, I mean just overnight it came to a screeching halt, but 5 states quickly rescinded their ratifications, and the other states simply shunned it for 40 years. The fact that it demands strict interpretation really places the ERA in a rather unique situation.